I never thought I'd be the guy sitting across from his wife in a dimly lit restaurant, the flicker of a candle dancing between us, ready to torch 8 years of a so-called perfect life. Natalie and I had built something everyone envied. A beautiful house with ivy crawling up the bricks, a 4-year-old daughter named Lily who giggled like the world was hers, and a marriage that looked flawless from the outside. 8 years of smiles, shared coffee mugs, and quiet nights on the couch. But tonight, at La Bella Vita, the air felt electric, heavy with secrets I couldn't hold in anymore. I'd picked this place for a reason. It was the same restaurant where I'd seen her with him last week, laughing in a way she hadn't with me in months. The waiter had just poured our wine, a deep red that shimmered in the glass like blood under the soft lights. Natalie looked stunning. She always did. Her hazel eyes catching the glow, her dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders. She wore that black dress I loved, the one that hugged her curves just right, and for a moment, I almost forgot why we were here. Almost. She smiled at me, a little nervous, her fingers brushing the stem of her glass. "This is nice, Adam," she said, her voice soft. "We haven't done this in a while." "Yeah," I said, taking a sip, letting the bitterness linger on my tongue. "Thought we could use a night out." My words were calm, but inside, I was a storm waiting to break. She didn't know what was coming. She didn't know I'd seen her here 7 days ago, tucked into a corner booth with a guy who wasn't me. Tall, dark hair, leaning in too close. I'd been at the bar, nursing a whiskey, watching her tilt her head back and laugh, her hand brushing his. It had gutted me, but I wasn't exactly innocent either. I set my glass down, the clink against the table louder than it should have been. Natalie's eyes flicked to mine, a question in them. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, and let the words spill out like I'd rehearsed them 100 times in my head. "Natalie," I said, my voice steady, "I know you're cheating on me. And you know what's the most interesting thing? I'm cheating on you too." Her face stopped moving. Time stretched, the hum of the restaurant fading into a dull roar in my ears. Those hazel eyes widened, then darted away, landing somewhere over my shoulder. Her lips parted, but nothing came out, not a denial, not a gasp, just silence. I could almost hear her heart slamming against her ribs, see the color drain from her cheeks. She didn't know which hit harder, that I knew, or that I'd matched her betrayal with my own. Good. I wanted her reeling. "Adam." Her voice cracked, barely a whisper, her fingers tightening around her glass like it might anchor her. How long have you known?" "Long enough," I said, leaning back in my chair, letting the weight of it settle between us. "Weeks, maybe. I saw you here last Tuesday. You didn't notice me at the bar, did you?" "Too busy with him." I smirked, though it felt more like a grimace. "But don't worry, Nat. I'm not here to play the martyr. I've been tangled up with someone else for months. Her name's Claire. She's different. Keeps things interesting." Her hand jerked, the napkin in her lap crumpling into a tight ball. "You're lying," she said, but it sounded desperate, like she was begging me to take it back. "Am I?" I tilted my head, swirling the wine in my glass, watching the liquid catch the light. "Tell me about your guy, Nat. Tall, dark hair, likes those late-night calls? I've seen the way you smile at your phone when you think I'm not looking. You were with him here, weren't you?" Looked real cozy. Her breath hitched, sharp and quick. She didn't deny it. She couldn't. I'd watched them from across the room, her fingers grazing his, that laugh I used to think was mine. It burned me alive, a slow simmer that turned into a blaze. But I wasn't clean. Claire had crashed into my life 6 months ago, all fire and temptation, her voice low and teasing in my ear during late-night meetings at work. She was my assistant, technically, sharp, ambitious, with a smile that promised trouble. I'd resisted at first, told myself I was better than that. Then one night, after too many drinks and a fight with Natalie, I wasn't. "Why are we doing this here?" Natalie asked, her voice dropping low, her eyes darting to the couples at nearby tables, oblivious to the wreckage unfolding. "Why now?" "Because," I said, leaning in again, my tone dipping into something darker. "I'm tired of the lies. We're both playing the same game, Nat. But here's the kicker. Claire's not just in it for me. She wants you gone. Out of the picture. And she's got a reason." Her forehead creased, confusion mixing with the fear in her eyes. "What are you talking about?" I let the silence hang, heavy and thick, savoring the way it pressed down on her. "She knows something about you," I said finally. Something you've buried deep. And she's ready to dig it up. Her face went white, paler than I'd ever seen it. That's insane, she said, shaking her head. I don't even know her. Don't you? I raised an eyebrow, watching her squirm. Think hard, Nat. Because she sure knows you. She shook her head again, faster this time, but I could see the gears turning, the flicker of doubt behind her panic. Then her phone buzzed on the table, a sharp vibration that cut through the tension. She glanced at it, and her whole body stiffened, raw, unfiltered fear flashing across her face. She snatched it up, fumbling to silence it, but not before I caught the name on the screen. Mark. Her lover, no doubt. Calling to check in, I said, my voice dripping with mockery, though my mind was racing. Claire had warned me about tonight. Last night, over the phone, her voice had been all velvet and edge. Adam, tomorrow's when it all unravels. Watch her squirm. I thought she meant the affair. Now I wasn't so sure. Adam, Natalie started, but the waiter swooped in, setting down our plates, steak for me, salmon for her. She stared at hers like it might leap off the table and attack her. Eat, I said, cutting into my steak, the knife sliding through the meat with a satisfying ease. We've got a long night ahead. She didn't touch her food. Her hand stayed in her lap, twisting that napkin into knots. What does she want from me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. This, Claire. I chewed slowly, letting her stew in it. She didn't say, just that you'd regret crossing her. Sound familiar? No. Her voice cracked, loud enough to draw a glance from the couple next to us. She lowered it, leaning closer. I've never met her. She's lying to you. She's manipulating you. Maybe, I said, shrugging like it didn't matter, though my pulse was hammering. But you've been lying too. So who's the bigger fool here? She glared at me, and damn if she wasn't gorgeous even then. Cheeks flushed, lips trembling, that fire I'd fallen for 8 years ago sparking behind the fear. It's what drew me to her in the first place. Her heat, her fight. And it's what made this mess so tangled, so impossible to walk away from. The rest of dinner was a slow burn, each bite of steak tasting like ash while Natalie sat across from me, her salmon untouched, her eyes darting between me and the table like she was waiting for the next blow. The candle between us flickered, casting shadows that danced over her face. Beautiful, haunted, guilty. I dropped the bomb about Claire, about her knowing something Natalie had buried, and now the air was thick with it, a stew of mistrust and unspoken truths. She kept glancing at her phone, silenced but buzzing every few minutes, and I knew it was him, Mark, pulling her strings even now. I paid the bill, the waiter oblivious to the war unfolding at our table, and we stepped into the cool February night. The air hit my face like a slap, sharp and bracing, but it did nothing to clear the fog in my head. Natalie's heels clicked fast on the pavement as we walked to the car, her shoulders hunched, her head turning every few steps like she was scanning the shadows. Something was off, way off. Expecting someone? I asked, unlocking the doors with a beep that echoed in the quiet parking lot. No, she snapped, too quick, sliding into the passenger seat and pulling her coat tight around her. Let's just go home. I didn't argue. I got in, started the engine, and pulled onto the highway, the hum of the tires a low growl beneath the silence between us. But then I saw it. Headlights in the rearview mirror, too close, too steady. My gut twisted. Nat, I said, keeping my voice even. Who's following us? What? She turned, her breath catching as she saw them too. I don't. Don't lie. I barked, my hands tightening on the wheel as I pressed the gas. The car behind us sped up, matching me move for move. Is it Mark? No. I swear, Adam, I don't know. Her voice was high, panicked, her hands gripping the edge of her seat. I didn't buy it, but I didn't have time to argue. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Claire. I hit speaker, tossing it onto the dash. Hey, lover. Her voice purred through the static, smooth and sultry like she was whispering in my ear. Having fun. Claire, what the hell's going on? I growled, weaving through traffic as the headlights loomed closer. Who's behind us? She laughed, low and throaty, the sound sending a shiver down my spine despite everything. Oh, Adam, you're so clueless. It's not about you. It's about her. Tell Natalie her past just caught up. The line went dead. Natalie grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. Adam, what does she mean? What past? You tell me. I shouted, glancing at her pale face, then back at the road. What she got on you? I don't know. Tears streaked her cheeks, smearing her mascara into dark rivers. I've never. The car behind us surged forward, slamming into our bumper with a jolt that threw us against our seats. Natalie screamed, a raw, primal sound that cut through the roar of the engine. Hold on, I yelled, flooring it, the speedometer climbing as I swerved into a side street, tires squealing on asphalt. The headlights followed, relentless, weaving through the narrow roads like a predator on our tail. My heart pounded, adrenaline flooding my veins, sharpening everything, the blur of streetlights, the scent of Natalie's perfume mixing with fear, the way her breath came in short, ragged gasps. Adam, please, she cried, clutching the door. Make it stop. I'm trying. I snapped, taking a hard left, then a right, cutting through an alley. The car stayed with us, a black shadow in the mirrors, too close for comfort. I didn't know who they were, Mark, Claire, someone else, but I knew this wasn't random. Claire's call had been too timed, too smug. 10 minutes of chaos later, I lost them, pulling into an empty lot behind a shuttered warehouse, the engine ticking as it cooled. Natalie was shaking, sobbing, her hands pressed to her face. Adam, I didn't mean for this, she said, her voice breaking. I love you. I was stupid, but save it. I cut her off, my knuckles white on the wheel, my chest heaving. We're done lying. Tell me the truth. Now. She swallowed hard, wiping her eyes with trembling fingers. Okay, she said, so quiet I almost missed it. Mark, he's not just some guy. He works for someone. They've been blackmailing me. Blackmailing you? I stared at her, my anger simmering into something colder, sharper. For what? Before we met, she said, her voice barely audible, I worked for a company, Technova. I faked some records. Financial stuff. They paid me to keep quiet when the audits came. It was a lot of money, Adam. I thought it was over when I left, but Mark found out. He tracked me down a year ago, said he'd expose me unless I stayed with him. I didn't want to lose you or Lily. I laughed, a bitter, jagged sound that echoed in the car. So you slept with him to protect us? That's rich, Nat. It wasn't like that. She cried, turning to me, her eyes wide and desperate. I hated it. I hated myself. I tried to break it off, but he wouldn't let me. He said he'd ruin us, send the proof to the police, to you, to everyone. And Claire. I pressed, my voice hard. Where does she fit? I don't know. She shook her head, frantic. Maybe she's part of it. Maybe she's working with him. I swear, Adam, I've never heard of her before tonight. My mind raced, piecing it together, or trying to. Claire had come into my life 6 months ago, all confidence and allure, her hands brushing mine during late nights at the office, her lips promising things I couldn't resist. I'd thought it was coincidence, a spark I couldn't ignore. Now it felt like a trap. Had she known about Natalie's secret all along? Was she playing me to get to her? I reached for my phone, but it buzzed first, a text from Claire. Check the glove box. Frowning, I popped it open. A photo slipped out, Natalie, younger, maybe 25, smiling with a man I didn't recognize. Dark suit, sharp jaw, a smug grin. On the back, scribbled in red ink, she ruined me. Now it's her turn. Adam. Natalie's voice trembled as I held it up. She took it, her hands shaking. Oh God, that's my old boss. David Reese. He went to prison because of me. What? I snatched it back, staring at her. Explain. She bit her lip, tears welling up again. When the feds caught on to Technova's fraud, I cut a deal. Testified against him to save myself. He got 10 years. I thought he'd never find me. The pieces clicked, jagged and ugly. Claire wasn't just my mistress. She was connected to this David, his sister, his lover, someone out for blood. And I'd been her way in, her weapon against Natalie. You've got some enemies, Nat, I said, my voice cold. And they're coming for you. She sobbed harder, reaching for me, but I pulled away. Adam, please, I'll fix this. Get out, I said, cutting her off. What? She froze, her hand hovering midair. Out. Now. I need to think. My tone was ice, unyielding. She stared at me, then stumbled out of the car, her coat flapping in the wind as she stood in the empty lot, crying. I peeled away, tires crunching gravel, my head a mess of rage and betrayal. But I wasn't done. Claire had played me too, and I wasn't letting that slide. The drive back alone was a blur, the highway stretching out like a dark ribbon under the February sky. Natalie's sobs echoed in my head, her confession twisting the knife deeper, blackmail, faked records, a deal that sent her old boss, David Reese, to prison. And Claire, with her sultry voice and knowing smile, had played me like a damn fiddle, using me to get to my wife. The photo in the glove box burned a hole in my pocket, that red ink promise of revenge glaring up at me every time I glanced at it. I'd left Natalie in that lot, tears streaking her face, but I wasn't running away. I was running towards something, answers, maybe, or a reckoning. I dialed Claire, my hands tight on the wheel. "Meet me," I said when she picked up, her breathy hello, lover barely out before I cut her off. "Midnight. Our spot." She laughed, that low, throaty sound that had hooked me months ago, and agreed. Our spot was the parking lot of the Regency Hotel, a discreet place off the highway where we'd met too many times, her lips on mine, her hands tugging me into a world I couldn't resist. When I pulled in at 11:58, she was there, leaning against her sleek black car, all curves and confidence in a red coat that hugged her like a second skin. The moonlight caught her blonde hair, turning it silver, and for a second, I forgot why I was mad, until she smirked. "Miss me?" she teased, stepping close, her perfume wrapping around me, intoxicating and dangerous. "You used me," I said, grabbing her wrist as she reached for my chest. "Why?" Her smile didn't falter, her green eyes glinting. "Natalie destroyed my brother," she said, voice smooth as silk. "David was everything to me. She sold him out, left him rotting in a cell. I wanted her to suffer. You were convenient." "And the car chase?" I tightened my grip, feeling her pulse under my fingers. "A little scare," she said, shrugging. "My friend owed me a favor. Thought it'd rattle her." I pulled her closer, our faces inches apart, her breath warm against my lips. "You're sick," I growled, but my blood was racing, that mix of anger and what she always stirred in me. "And you love it," she whispered, her lips brushing my ear, sending a jolt through me. "Admit it, Adam. You're not the good guy either." She wasn't wrong. I kissed her, hard, angry, alive, pouring every tangled emotion into it, her body pressing against mine like she belonged there. Then I pushed her back, breaking the spell. "This ends now," I said, stepping away, my chest heaving. "Does it?" She laughed, adjusting her coat. "Call me when you're bored." I didn't answer. I drove home, the taste of her still on my lips, my head a war zone. Natalie was there when I walked in, sitting on the couch, Lily asleep upstairs. Her eyes were red, her hair a mess, but she stood when she saw me. "Adam," she said, voice raw. "I'm sorry. Can we fix this?" I looked at her, my wife, my liar, my love, and something shifted. "Maybe," I said, tossing my keys on the table. "But first, we're digging up every skeleton you've got. No more secrets." She nodded, tears falling, relief mixing with fear. But then my phone buzzed Claire again. A text, one last surprise. "Check your attic." I froze, my stomach dropping. "What now?" Natalie whispered, seeing my face. "Stay here," I said, heading for the stairs. The attic hatch creaked as I pulled it down, the ladder unfolding with a groan. I climbed up, the air musty and cold, flashlight in hand. Boxes lined the walls, old photos, Lily's baby clothes, but something caught my eye, a metal lockbox, new, out of place. I pried it open, my heart hammering. Inside was a stack of papers, Technova financials, Natalie's handwriting on forged entries, emails between her and David Reese. Proof of her crime, untouched by her deal with the feds. And a note, in Claire's elegant scrawl. She lied about the deal. She framed him. "This goes public unless you leave her. Your move." I sank back, the flashlight trembling in my hand. Natalie hadn't cut a deal, she'd pinned it all on David, walked free while he took the fall. Claire wasn't just vengeful, she had the ammo to destroy us both. I stumbled downstairs, the box under my arm, and found Natalie waiting, her eyes wide. "What is it?" she asked, stepping toward me. I dropped the box on the table, papers spilling out. "You didn't testify," I said, voice low, deadly. "You framed him. Lied to me about everything." Her face crumpled. "Adam, I—" "Shut up," I snapped, pacing, my mind reeling. "Claire's got this. She'll ruin you, us, unless I walk away." She grabbed my arm, desperate. I was scared. They were going to pin it on me. I had to. Had to what? I shook her off. Ruin a man's life? Ruin ours. I ran a hand through my hair, torn between rage and the love I couldn't shake. "She's got us cornered, Nat." "Then fight her," she pleaded, tears streaming. "We can take her down together. I'll turn myself in, tell the truth, anything. Just don't leave me." I stared at her, then at the papers, the weight of it all crashing down. Claire's game, Natalie's lies, my own mistakes. My phone buzzed again. Claire. Tick-tock. I could leave, let Natalie face the fallout, start over with Claire's twisted promises. Or I could stay, fight, claw our way out of this mess. I grabbed the papers, shoving them back in the box. Get your coat, I said. Decision made. We're burning this. Then we're finding Claire. Natalie blinked, hope flickering. What? She doesn't get to win, I said, pulling her close, our foreheads touching. We're done running. We take her down together. She nodded, a shaky laugh escaping her. Together. We burned the papers in the backyard, the flames licking the night sky, then drove to Claire's apartment. I knocked, hard, and when she opened the door smirking, barefoot, a glass of wine in hand, I didn't hesitate. It's over, I said, Natalie behind me. You've got nothing left. Her smirk faded as I held up my phone, recording everything. Try me, she said, but her voice wavered. David's case, Natalie said, stepping forward. I'll confess. Clear his name. You've got no leverage. Claire's eyes narrowed, but she backed off. You'll regret this, she hissed, slamming the door. We didn't. Back home, Natalie called the feds the next morning, coming clean. They cut her a deal: probation, no jail, thanks to her cooperation. Claire vanished, her game lost. And me? I stayed. Not because it was easy, but because Natalie, flawed, fierce, mine, was worth it. The echo of Claire's door slamming still rang in my ears as Natalie and I drove home, the night pressing against the car windows like a living thing. Her confession to the feds that morning: probation, no jail, felt like a lifeline, a shaky truce between us. We burned the papers, faced Claire down, and come out the other side, battered but together. I'd chosen her, flaws and all, because walking away didn't feel right, not after 8 years, not with Lily's laughter still lighting up our house. But as the tires hummed on the pavement, a nagging itch told me this wasn't over. Claire didn't lose gracefully. We pulled into the driveway, the house dark except for the porch light flickering like a tired heartbeat. Natalie squeezed my hand, her touch warm, tentative. We did it, she said, her voice soft, hopeful. It's really over, isn't it? I wanted to believe her. I forced a smile, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Yeah, I said, though my gut twisted. Let's get some sleep. Inside, Lily was still at her grandma's, safe, oblivious, and the silence was deafening. Natalie headed upstairs, her footsteps fading, while I lingered in the kitchen, pouring a whiskey I didn't need. My phone sat on the counter, a black slab of temptation. I shouldn't have checked it, but I did. A new text from Claire. You think you've won? Look out your window. My stomach dropped. I crossed to the living room, pulling the curtain aside. Across the street, under a street lamp, a figure stood, just a shadow, but I'd know that silhouette anywhere. Claire. She didn't move, didn't wave, just watched. Then she turned and vanished into the dark. My pulse kicked up, a mix of anger and something hotter, something I hated myself for feeling. Adam. Natalie's voice called from upstairs. You coming? Yeah, I lied, pocketing the phone. But I didn't go up. I grabbed my keys and slipped out the back door, the cool air biting my skin as I circled the block. I had to know what she was up to. Claire didn't bluff. I found her 2 streets over, leaning against a lamppost, her red coat a slash of color in the night. She saw me coming, her lips curling into that smirk that drove me crazy. Couldn't stay away, could you? She said, stepping closer, her voice a velvet blade. What's your game now? I demanded, stopping just out of reach. We're done, Claire. You lost. Lost? She laughed, low and dangerous, closing the gap until I could feel her heat. Oh, Adam, you're so naive. Natalie's not the only one with skeletons. Did she tell you about the money? What money? I snapped, though my chest tightened. Her eyes gleamed. The payoff from Technova. She didn't just frame David, she kept the cash. $500,000, stashed somewhere. I found it. And I'm not the only one looking. I grabbed her arm, pulling her close, our breaths mingling. You're lying. Am I? She tilted her head, lips brushing my jaw, sending a jolt through me. Ask her where she goes every Thursday. That little storage unit downtown? It's not for old furniture. I shoved her back, my mind racing. Thursdays, Natalie's, errands, always vague, always alone. Why tell me this? I said, voice rough. What's in it for you? Revenge, she purred, straightening her coat. And maybe you. Leave her, Adam. We split the money, start over. Or I hand it to the feds, and she's gone for good. I stared at her, torn between the pull of her words and the life I just fought for. "You're poison," I said, turning away. "Call me when you change your mind," she called after me, her laugh trailing like smoke. Back home, Natalie was in bed, asleep, or pretending to be. I didn't wake her. Instead, I waited until dawn, then followed her Thursday routine. She left at 9, kissed me distractedly, and drove downtown. I tailed her, heart pounding, to a grimy storage facility. Unit 17. She unlocked it, slipped inside, and emerged 10 minutes later, empty-handed but nervous, glancing around. I waited until she was gone, then broke in crowbar from the car, lock snapping too easily. Inside, under a tarp, was a duffel bag. I unzipped it. Stacks of cash, crisp and real, more than I could count. $500,000, easy. And a note in Natalie's handwriting, for Lily's future. My knees buckled. She hadn't lied about loving us. She'd kept this for our daughter, a twisted safety net from her past. But she'd lied about everything else. I sat there, the money heavy in my hands, until my phone buzzed. "Claire, found it yet?" I didn't answer. I hauled the bag to the car, drove home, and waited. When Natalie walked in, I was on the couch, the duffel at my feet. Her face went white. "Adam." "$500,000, I said, voice flat. "For Lily." "Huh? When were you going to tell me?" She sank to her knees, tears spilling. I couldn't. It was dirty money. I wanted to clean it, use it for her college, something good. "I swear, Stop." I cut her off, standing. "Claire knows. She's threatening to turn you in." Her sobs choked her. "What do we do?" I paced, the whiskey glass still in my hand, untouched. Claire's offer echoed. Leave, take the money, start over with her fire and chaos. Or stay, fight again, protect what we had. I looked at Natalie, broken but still mine, and made my call. "We're moving it," I said, tossing her the car keys. "Tonight. Somewhere she'll never find." We buried it, literally, in a lockbox under the old oak behind my parents' cabin, 2 hours north. No paper trail, no trace. Natalie clung to me after, her body trembling against mine in the dark woods. "I love you," she whispered, lips brushing my neck, reigniting that old spark. "Prove it," I said, pulling her closer, our kiss fierce, desperate, a reclaiming. Days passed. Claire texted once, "You'll regret this." Then nothing. The feds closed Natalie's case, the money stayed hidden, and we rebuilt, slowly, messily. But one night, a month later, I woke to an empty bed. Natalie was gone. So was the car. Panic hit, then dread. I found a note on the counter. I had to end it. "She found us. I'm sorry." The cabin key was missing. I raced north, breaking every speed limit, arriving at dawn. The oak was dug up, the lockbox gone. Natalie's car was there, empty. Footprints, 2 sets, led into the woods. I followed, heart in my throat, until I saw them. Natalie, alive, kneeling by a creek, washing dirt from her hands. And Claire, sprawled on the ground, a rock beside her, blood matting her hair. "She came for it," Natalie said, voice hollow, standing. I couldn't let her take everything. I stared, shock numbing me. "You." "She attacked me," she said, tears falling. "It was her or us." I pulled her into my arms, the weight of it all crashing down, love, lies, death. We buried Claire there, shallow and silent, and drove home. No one came looking. The money stayed lost, a ghost between us. But Natalie's grip on my hand tightened every day, and I knew we'd survive the lies. Together.